Okay, all these words that I'm going to read are words of Jesus. And so I'll start in verse 1. We're going to read through verse 17. Jesus says this, "I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that's thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it'll be done for you. This is to my Father's glory that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you'll remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. For everything that I've learned from my Father I've made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit, fruit that will last. So whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. This is my command: love each other." And today we're going to particularly be looking at this I am claim in verse 5, where Jesus says, "I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. And apart from me, you can do nothing." And this claim, I think, is an astounding claim. Jesus is saying that there is this power, this life, that is available if we, like branches, will draw off the organic life force that comes from the vine. And one of the key phrases in this passage, and you probably picked it up even as we read it, was this idea of bearing fruit. If we remain in Jesus, then we'll bear much fruit. And apart from Jesus, we really can't bear any fruit. And when it comes to bearing fruit, just so that we can zero in on the issue here, I'd like to show you probably one of the most famous passages in the Bible about the kind of fruit that gets born in our life when God begins to work. And this comes from Galatians chapter 5, where Paul's writing, and he says this: "The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control." And you realize that's the kind of fruit that finally God wants to bring about in our life. You realize that what this passage is really about is about our character and how it comes to be that a person changes. So let me see if I can name it. How does a selfish person, an unselfish person, a selfish person become unselfish? Or how does an angry person find inner peace? How does a whiner become a giver? How does somebody who's impatient become patient? How does someone who's all about themselves become someone who loves? Those are really the premier questions that I think the entire world is asking. How does a person change? And for most of us who are sitting here today, I mean, that's a question that's on our mind. I mean, we see ourselves, we see who we are, we see the kind of mess we're making of things. Like, how can I possibly find a way to change, truly change? And for some of us who aren't bothered by that question, right? We're not asking ourselves, how do I change? How do I truly change? Let me tell you who is interested: the people who live with us, right? They're wondering, like, what is wrong with that person? How do I get them to change? And if you walk into a bookstore, you will find there are just shelves devoted to this topic that Jesus is taking up right here. how does someone start to get these fruit in their life so that, if they're a warrior, they find a ground. If they're, impatient, they find patience. If they're boiling over all the time, how they finally steady themselves and become calm. Like, how does that happen? And everyone's asking that question. And if we're not asking it about individuals, we're certainly asking about communities. I think, for example, I'm sure you realize this, that there's an election that we're all participating in this Tuesday. And by the way, as Christians, we should, because we have the opportunity to vote. That's a fantastic gift. But let me suggest to you what it is that's driving everyone. I mean, why people are becoming so passionate this time of year. It's this. We want a better and more noble society, right? We don't want our society to degenerate. We want it to become something much better. And if we want that on kind of a global level, you have to realize it all starts kind of individually right in here. How do people change and become better and more beautiful? Since that's the question, let me first point out one of the most important things that Jesus is saying here when he says, I'm the vine, you're the branches. If you remain in me, you'll bear this fruit. Change is possible and it'll happen to you. When he's saying this, I want you to look with me at verse 16. One of the things he's saying in this passage is it's a fact. This kind of change, real change, is possible. And I want to show you what Jesus says. He says in verse 16, you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit that will last. In other words, Jesus is saying, look, it's not your effort that I'm requiring here. I am choosing you, and I am appointing you to go and bear fruit. There's a passage in Romans chapter 8, if you want to read in the Bible about how God's at work and taking the initiative. I think Romans chapter 8, just some of these verses I'll put on the screen. For those God foreknew, he also predestined. So before the world ever came to be, Romans chapter 8 says, God, he was at work predestining us, putting everything together so that he could do his work and cause us to bear fruit, to be conformed to the image of his Son. I mean, he's not content just leaving us the way we are. He wants to change us and make us more like Jesus, who's perfect and beautiful in every way. It says, those he predestined, he called. Those he called, he also justified. Those he justified, he also glorified. Notice what Paul is saying here. He's saying God takes all the initiative in it. May I put it this way? The God who stretched the stars out in the sky is focusing all his power, all his intensity, all his immensities on making you a better, more beautiful person. He's taking the initiative. He's taking the power. Now, just to kind of speak frankly with everybody here, I think most of us, we probably at some point or another, we get comfortable with ourselves. So there are these habits, there are these flaws, there are these things, and we say to ourselves things like this, well, I'll probably never change. I'll probably always be this way. I'm probably just going to have to put up with the fact that, I'm this way. And I just want to say to you, whoa, listen to what Jesus is saying. Listen to what Paul is saying. Listen to what God's up to. The God of the universe is focusing all his power, all his might, all his intensity, all his immensities on making you better, more beautiful. He wants to cause you to bear the kind of fruit of a totally changed and transformed life. And so, whatever low expectations we have for ourselves, they should just fade away. And two thoughts that ought to come to our mind. One, we ought to be thrilled, just happy. Whoa, God wants to do that with me. That's fantastic. But if you understand what is being said here, you also ought to be a little scared. Like, what's God going to do with me? I mean, that should be just a little scary. Anyway, it's possible. That's the first point. Now I want to talk about what this change looks like. So Jesus says, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me, you'll bear fruit. If not, you won't. I want to tell you the kind of power that Jesus is speaking here is what I'll call organic or life power. And the idea is this, that as branches, we will extract or thirst for and draw off of the resources that are there in the vine. And so his life will begin to flow on ours. And that's certainly a certain kind of power, but I want to distinguish it from what I might call explosive power. And here's the reason why. Some of us, when we become Christians, we hear God knocking on the door of our heart, and at some point there becomes a crisis. We're ready to respond, and maybe even this is the case. You, at the end of a service, have walked forward and you pray and you say, okay, God, I'm ready, and I surrender and I trust in you. You may expect this explosive power to enter your life, and from that moment on, boom, everything's different and nothing's the same, and all my old habits and all my old sins are gone, and I'm going to walk on a cloud and everything's going to be perfect. And then you did that, but that didn't happen. You truly gave your life to Christ, but what's really different here? I still feel like me. You expected an explosion because there's power, and it was something else. And I'd like to talk about that something else, because even though it's not what you expected, it's still important. So I've shown you this before, but I want to play this game again. We'll call it the game of Smash. So here we go. Watermelon versus sledgehammer. Who wins? Sledgehammer. Okay. Concrete block versus acorn. Who wins? If it's explosive power, acorn loses every single time. But there's something called organic or life power. See this picture? And some of us, we have blocks or walls that are built up. We think nothing will ever crash through that. But Jesus, he draws on these sort of plant life, organic images to describe the kind of power that's at work in our life. And as we draw off the vine, this is the kind of power that's at work. So maybe I can put it this way. In my backyard, I planted 2 mango trees. When I planted them, they were both really, really small. Now, every year, as I look at these trees, they're bigger. They're more developed, they're better. In fact, my mango tree first, it started flowering and it's getting ready. And I'm saying, wow, this year I might get a lot of fruit, actually. Day by day, if you go out and you look at my mango tree and just stare at it, you'd say, nothing's happening. But year by year, something profound is happening. Life, organic power. I have 3 kids. Same kind of thing, right? They're growing up now. People who haven't seen them for a while will be surprised when they see them. Wow, your kids are getting so big. But day by day, I can hardly perceive it. And that's the kind of power that Jesus, it's organic life power. We're branches, he is the vine. We're drawing off the resources that come in the vine. Some of us, when we come to Christ, we expect explosion, massive. No, but that doesn't mean it's not powerful. Just look at what finally happens. Walls will come tumbling down. It's a kind of power that is just very, very profound, and little by little, you may not notice it all at once, but as you draw close to Jesus and you have a really vital friendship and relationship with him and you remain in him, this is the kind of power that can be at work in your life. And so if you're an angry person as you draw close to Jesus, or if you're an impatient person, or if you're a worrier, or whatever it is, the more and more you grow closer to Jesus, you will draw off the life that he has. His life will flow into you, and you'll begin to change. By the way, this kind of change, I'd like to now talk a little more about it, is different from what I'll call kind of mechanical compliance based on our own resources. So Jesus says here, apart from me, you can do nothing. You're only left to your own devices. And here's the thing, all those self-help books that you find on the shelf, all the techniques, they're what I'll call just mechanical compliance. And I guess what I'll do is I'll use a case study to illustrate the point. And I'm going to talk about a married couple, and when you do this kind of thing, you do a case study, it'll just turn out that it's either the stupid husband or the stupid wife. And there are great examples of both. But just for the sake of talking, I'm going to choose a story that's the stupid husband story. Probably identify more. Anyway, here's the thing. As a pastor, People come to me all the time, and I'll get calls like this. So the husband calls up, and he says something like this, listen, Scott, I really need to talk to you. Things are really going bad in my marriage. You probably didn't know that, but they're really off the tracks. And my wife says she's leaving, but I begged her, and she said that she's willing to come and talk to you. Can we please come and see you? So I'll say sure, and they'll come to my office. We'll sit down, and I'll pray with them, and I'll just start out, hey, what's going on? And often what happens, in fact, sometimes the wives, they've written it down, so they'll pull out a piece of paper. And there'll be what I'll call the list of grievances. And they'll just start in, and they'll read through the list. And the list will be things like this. You are a controlling, manipulative person. Everything always has to go your way. You don't care what I think. And then she'll say, and furthermore, you're emotionally unavailable. I try to talk to you about these things, but you always just shut down. And that'll be point 2, and there'll be 8 other points. And then finally, the husband, who now is being confronted with this list, will finally take it in for the first time and say, wow, I knew you felt this way, but I never knew you felt this way, that it was bothering you this much. And he'll say things like, baby, I'll change. I'm sorry, I promise you, I'm going to change. He'll say things like, I love you so much, and I just don't want to lose you, and I don't want to lose the kids, and whatever you want, I'll do it. And here's what will normally happen. Normally, when the husband says things like this, he will go back and he will make changes. He'll conform his life to kind of, match the list of grievances, and there'll be this sort of change that is displayed. But some months will go by, and then all of a sudden, you know what happens, right? Those changes, they don't stick. They fade. And here's the reason why. He finally discerns that the crisis is over, she's committed to staying, and so he goes right back to the way it always has been. Why? Because there's no real change in here. There's just been kind of mechanical compliance and change that's happened on the outside through external means. A couple of the external means we use sometimes that really motivates us and cause us to kind of twist ourselves into a new shape, fear. So he says, oh, honey, I love you, and I just don't want to lose you, and I don't want to lose the kids. It's not love. He's not thinking about her. He's just thinking about himself, and it's fear. Or else he'll change out of pride. You're right. I don't want to be like all those other loser husbands out there. I'm such a better person than they are, and I'm going to prove to you that I'm going to be the best husband and the best father. Here's the thing. Pride and fear are the root of what gets us into all our messes in the first place. And so if pride and fear become the motivators to cause us to twist and change, maybe some of those changes will stick sort of, but they'll just cause other problems. The kind of organic life change that's being talked about here is a new internal dynamic that flows from the outside and would draw off its resources and comes on the inside and causes us to be changed from the inside out. And let me tell you something, that kind of power is so much more real than just being motivated by pride or fear or by whatever else we do to sort of twist ourselves into some new direction for the time being. And if you can see this, maybe we're at a point where you're now saying, okay, Scott, great. But how do I get that? How do I get so vitally connected to Jesus that, listen, I've maybe been a Christian for a long time, and I just don't sense the kind of change you're talking about. I really need to change. How's that happen? And if you're asking that question, then let me talk to 2 groups of people. First, to those of you who are Christians, and then I want to talk to those of you who are non-Christians. And to the Christians, let me try it this way. So there comes a certain time of year where I grew up in Montana, so we used to go out in the forest and do this. Now I only have an artificial one, but Christmas tree. Here's what we do. We go outside, we cut the tree down, and we bring it into our home, and it looks great, and then we make it look even better. We put ornaments on it and tinsel on it and lights on it, and then we stand the tree up and it just looks fantastic. But as the Christmas season goes by, you get about 3, 4, 5 weeks in, what starts to happen? Although we dressed it up on the outside, it starts to kind of look worse and worse and worse and worse. Why? It's no longer connected to the roots. It's no longer drawing life. We've prettied it up on the outside. The reason I use this image, some of us became Christians. We got connected to Jesus. We responded to him. We said, yes, I surrender. I put my faith in you. And we realized it was all grace. In other words, we realized God took the initiative. He chose us. His intensities, immensities got focused on us. We didn't do anything. He chose us. We got in that way, but then here's what happened. We said to ourselves, okay, now I'm a Christian. And immediately it dawns on us, well, if I'm going to be a Christian, there's certain things I got to clean up. And so we stop doing some things, we start doing other things, and then what can often happen is we get busy. We say, well, I got to take care of the poor, I got to become involved in this church program, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. And we get really, really, really busy. And we're doing all kinds of things that make us look like pretty little Christians on the outside. But here's what we failed to do. We failed to cultivate a friendship and a vital relationship with Jesus. And as a result, because we're not drawing from his life force, although at first everything started to look very, very pretty, this can happen. I mean, you can be a very busy and pretty Christian for a long, long, long time and have never cultivated a real vital relationship with Jesus. You need to be fed. You need to draw off the vine. You need to take the resources of Jesus. You need his life to flow into your life. And here's the thing. I'm going to speak really frankly. So for many of us, the only time we get fed is on Sunday mornings right here when I stand up and I open the Bible and I try to offer food. And I do. I try the very best I can. I want to present Christ. And by the way, it's Christ that you want to draw off of. And so you'll get some of that every single Sunday morning. But listen, every Christian, if you finally want to experience this power, the organic, life-giving power, you've got to be what I call a self-feeding Christian. You can't just be dependent on, 30 minutes once a week. You've got to be to that point where you cultivate a real, vital friendship like with Jesus. What's a friendship? A friendship happens when you really get to know someone. How do you get to know Jesus? Well, it's really simple things. I mean, you read his word. We learn more about him. You pray. And listen, if you've been a Christian for some time and it's just kind of the same old thing, and what is this power that Scott's talking about? Why don't I? It's probably because you've sort of become like this Christmas tree. You got prettied up at the start, but now you're withering away because you're not drawing off his resources. And so, you've got to draw. You've got to cultivate that life, friendship, and relationship with him. When you do, you'll become more and more like him all the time. Okay, that's to the Christians. Now to the non-Christians. So sometimes when I'm talking with non-Christians, they'll say, okay, Scott, I'm sold. I want a relationship with Jesus. I get it. All this external compliance, I don't need that anymore. All the self-help books never got me anywhere. What I really need is I need the God of the universe to get tapped into him so that I can draw off his life and I'll be changed from the inside out. And then they'll say, okay, but what do I need to do? Or maybe you're even asking like, okay, so what are the rules going to be? I guess there's probably some rules about my sex life that I'm going to have to follow. Or I don't know about that. Probably, I've heard this about Christians, they've got to give 10% of their income away. Oh, that's going to hurt. I don't know about that. Or I picked this up that I'm going to have to forgive people that I'm really angry with, and I just don't know if I can do that. Are there any other rules? Because I need to know about them ahead of time, right? And if you're thinking that way, if you're thinking of becoming a Christian and you're thinking that way, then I just want to let you know you're probably simultaneously making Christianity too hard and too easy. Let's start with too hard. So if you've got this set of things and you say, oh, I don't know if I can do that, or oh, I don't know if you can do this, let me just say, listen, Christianity is not a system of rules. And you don't get life by following them. Christianity is ultimately a relationship with Jesus. And let me to use the language here. You don't get the vine by producing the fruit. You produce the fruit by being connected to the vine. Does that make sense? Like, it's not that you have to follow all these rules and then God will accept you. It's that God accepts you and now you start to produce the fruit. And here's the thing. So when it comes to money or sex or forgiveness, listen, right now you're thinking, oh, that'll be so hard. When you become a giving person, it won't be hard at all. Those who finally become giving Christians, they don't say to themselves like, oh, how can I part with this money? They say, wow, I am so joyful that God has turned my life around and he's made me something new and I've started to become a giver instead of a taker. I mean, it'll be the most wonderful thing that happens to you. No one will have to convince you to do it. Or sex. I mean, it won't be difficult for you at all to get into the kind of relationship that God really wants you to be in, because you'll say, wow, I never knew that God wanted sex to be so beautiful and awesome and so much more important and profound than this empty thing I've been thinking it was. No one's going to have to twist your arm to forgive anyone. You'll be so connected to Jesus, you'll be so tuned into him, his forgiveness will so overwhelm you that you just won't be able to hold on to the grudges that you used to hold on to. It's not going to feel like having to follow rules. You're going to be connected to Jesus, and these new principles are going to flow into you. And if you're in the vine, you will bear fruit. You'll just start to change. And by the way, here at Sunlight, I always use these three words: sin, salvation, service. And the reason I do is because I think it's so important that you understand the order. Sin, we're all sinners. None of us measure up. We can't clean ourselves up and make ourselves acceptable to God. That's not how it happens. Instead, salvation. God in his love and mercy sent a substitute, Jesus, to take our place. God actually took all our guilt and shame and put it on Jesus, and he took the punishment that we deserved. He died in our place. Salvation. Then service. Because I've been saved from my sin, because I've been brought back into a meaningful relationship with God, now out of that, I begin to serve. When you say, what are the rules? What do I have to do? You're thinking, oh, I've got to clean myself up before. No, just come. Just start the friendship and start to draw off the vine. You'll see what will happen. You're making it way too hard. But also, I have to say this, you're making it way too easy. You've got this list and you think, well, okay, God's going to make me celibate for a time, and God's going to, take some of my money, and God's going to... Listen, God's not primarily interested in your sex life. He's not primarily interested in your pocketbook. He's primarily interested in you. You have this small little list of things you think he wants. He doesn't want to do some small little list with you. Listen, let me put it this way. Jesus did not come to torment your normal life. He came to kill it. He came to take your old self and put it to death. He said, anyone who come after me must take up their cross and follow me. There's not some small little list of things he wants to change. He wants to change everything about you. And you've just got to see that. And what's required, you've got to understand, he's the vine, we're the branch. Two quick illustrations, then I'll finish. Some of us, when we approach Jesus, we think about like driving the car of our life. And we think about Jesus like this: boy, it's great to have a Jesus in my trunk. Right? When I run into an emergency, when the car somehow goes off the road and I got a flat tire, it's really good to have Jesus back there so that, I can get out of my car, I can pop the trunk, I can say, hey, Jesus, I'm in trouble here. Can you fix things? And we think he'll get out of the trunk, he'll fix the car up, and then he'll pop back in the trunk, and he won't bother anything else, and we'll just drive on. If you come to know Jesus at all, you realize, okay, wait, that's not how you treat Jesus. So some of us, we get a little bolder. We say, got to take him out of the trunk. He really should have a seat in the car. We'll put him in the back seat. And we think of Jesus like this annoying backseat driver. Like we're going along, and he's saying, turn right, and we're like, no, we're supposed to go left. And he's saying, you're hugging the line, and no, he's just kind of correcting us. And he's like a little annoying backseat driver who's always there bugging us. And If you come to know who Jesus is, you know, like, okay, I can't have him in the back seat. So some of us have gotten so bold as to bring him up next to us, and we call him our co-pilot. Jesus is my co-pilot. We let him be the navigator. Hey, Jesus, just let me know where to go. I'll go there if you tell me. But if you know Jesus at all, he's not the emergency kit in the trunk. He's not the annoying backseat driver. He's not the co-pilot. He's the God of the universe, and he's Lord. And if you want to be a branch that's connected to the vine, if you want to know him at all and have a friendship with him all, you have to realize that at some point you've got to take the keys, hand them over. And you know that Carrie Underwood song, Jesus, take the wheel? You've got to get to the point where you say, listen, I made a mess out of my life. Take over, you're in charge. That's one way. Here's the second way. Actually, this comes from a Bible teacher. Her name was Henrietta Mears. And I heard this one time. I really think it's fantastic. She was reflecting on this passage of Scripture, Hebrews chapter 1. Hebrews chapter 1 says, in the past, God spoke to our ancestors through the prophets at many times and in various ways. But in these last days, he's spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, and through whom he also made the universe. Then it says, the Son is the radiance of God's glory, the exact representation of his being, sustaining all things by his powerful word. She said, listen, do you see who Jesus is? Jesus is the one who made the universe. Jesus is the one who's sustaining all things by his powerful word. In other words, the stars in the sky and everything in the universe are being held together at his command and at his simple word. Then what she did is she took a piece of paper. She said, listen, the distance between Earth and the sun is 93 million miles. And if 93 million miles is represented by just the small width of a piece of paper, she says, what you have to realize is that if we were to travel the distance between our sun and the nearest star, you would actually need a stack of papers that would go all the way up 70 feet. Right? That's just from our sun to the nearest star. If you look up at the ceiling right now, 70 feet is about 3 times the height of our ceiling. Right? So if this is 93 million miles, to get to the nearest star, 70 feet up, 3 times the height of our ceiling. Then she said, listen, it's amazing what astronomers are figuring out. If you were to travel from one end of our galaxy to the other end, and you were to represent that by sheets of paper, you would need to stack up sheets of paper that are 310 miles high. She says, that's just our galaxy. We now know that there are galaxies, millions of galaxies. We're just like the tiniest little speck in one quadrant of the universe. And if you think this is true, that Jesus made it, and that by his power, the entire universe is being held together, she said, that is not the kind of person you make your secretary. That's not how to treat Jesus if he's your friend. The only way is to admit he's Lord. He's God. Get rid of your small ambitions for the changes you think need to be made. As you draw off his power, he's going to do, it's not just a list of tiny things. You're making it way too easy. You've got to come to him and say, if that's who you are, then I just surrender all. I'm nothing compared to you. Wherever you say, I'm ready to go. Whatever you want me to do, I'll follow. And until you get that far, you'll never experience the kind of change I'm talking about. Jesus says, I'm the vine, and you're the branches. If you remain in me, you'll bear much fruit. You'll draw from my life all the immensities, intensities of the God of the universe flowing into your life to make you a totally new person. But he also says, apart from me, you can do nothing.